The seas. They are followed by 153 German divisions. Rommel believes in tanks and in the Lightning War. He quickly orders the Africa Corps to set off for the British positions. The first of air-marked sappers steal over onto Russian territory. The Russians fight until the very end. The Darien continues to advance. In the meantime, the rest of the German forces, the Sixth Army led by General Powers, is marching towards Stalingrad. By September 1942, Powers reaches the railway line and goes to Moscow. He manages to follow it all the way to Stalingrad. From there they can control all of Stalingrad. On October 15, 1942, the Germans reach their goal, the Great Russian River, the Boulder. They fight to control even the tiniest room. The world is holding its breath. Will Hitler defeat Stalin? For Kaker is just outside Egypt. The Wehrmacht occupies a third of Russia. The Imperial Navy of Japan controls the Pacific, and Germany's submarines are wreaking havoc in the Atlantic. At the head of the biggest armada ever put together. 200 battleships and above all, an exceptional fleet of 8 aircraft carriers, transporting nearly 600 planes. Carriers than Yamamoto, but he brings them all over to set up an ambush. And then take off to attack the Japanese fleet. Torpedo Squadron 8 will strike first. Montgomery launches his offensive with a preliminary artillery barrage, followed by a massive tank assault. For the German 88 flat guns cause tremendous losses. Rommel's soldiers counterattack relentlessly. Ronald retreats in order to surround the German army occupying Stalingrad. At 7 a.m., the Soviets obliterate the enemy's lines, pounding them with the rocket launchers they call Stalin's organs. Zhukov's massive army launches the offensive. The Germans see the Soviet tanks close the circle around them. General Peliss's Sixth Army is trapped inside Stalingrad. Beyond the red flag is the Univermag store, where the commander of the Sixth Army, General Friedrich Powers, is entrenched. His men surrender. Is one of the biggest battles of the Second World War. The Wehrmacht's troops are pushed back. The Great Patriotic War, as they call it, has taken a new turn for them. The Red Army is suddenly able to strike with a force that amazes all sides. An endless supply of men, even after the extremely costly battles of Moscow and Stalingrad. The Eastern Front is 1,000 kilometers wide, but the Russians are able to push forward hundreds of kilometers within 2 months, destroying 17 German army divisions. The Wehrmacht retreats towards East Prussia, leaving behind many thousands. For the Wehrmacht, the situation is deteriorating. 50,000 German soldiers are taken prisoner. It is a much-needed victory for the Allies. Most of the German army has retreated to the east. But the German offensive in the Ardennes failed, due to the extraordinary defense put up by the American paratroopers in Bastogne, to the intervention of General Patton's tanks, and to the overwhelming power for the Allied air forces. Power of United States is such that just a few days after the Normandy landings in Europe, it's able to assemble a second fleet on the other side of the world, in the Pacific. Until now, it has remained untouched. Dresden, known as the Florence of the Elder, was one of Europe's finest medieval cities. His tanks north towards Berlin. But his remaining soldiers, overwhelmed by the Russian rocket launchers, surrender one after the other. Beneath the ruins of the Chancellery, in his underground bunker, Hitler rants and raves and maneuvers his imaginary armies. The war in the Pacific continues. The Marines raise the American flag on top of Mount Suribachi, the volcano that dominates the island of Iwo Jima. The battle took the lives of 7,000 Americans and 20,000 Japanese. It is now possible for the Boeing B-29 Super Fortress bombers, taking off from Iwo Jima and other islands in the Pacific, to reach Japan 1.5 million. Soviet troops stormed into Manchuria and northern China. There were still over 1 million Japanese troops in the area, but the Red Army blitzkrieg was unstoppable. The Japanese position in the war had become untenable. Ferocious month-long battle to seize the Philippine government. In the Pacific, the suicide pilots of the Japanese, called kamikaze, nosedived their planes into the American fleet. In the end, the United States decides against an invasion of Japan, which it thinks will cost the country 1 million lives.